Hey there, listeners. Thanks again for tuning into Sin's Workshop. Hope you're all having a wonderful day. Alright, so today we're going to be talking about Iron Widow. This this is I just had lunch. A young adult fantasy. Well, not really. It's a sci-fi. I would say it's more science fiction. But what the author does with this story is she utilizes her culture's history in order to showcase a really strong movement for empowerment and feminism. And the best way she does this is by she's using China's one and only female empress, Wu Zetian, as her main protagonist. But again, it's a really good blend of historical fiction and futurism because, the author, she said in her, author notes, which, normally I don't read the author's notes. I just kind of want to get to the story. But I've started to lately. And I'm really glad I did because this is a story that blends together Pacific Rim and Handmaid's Tale in a way. And she says this by, she asked herself this question. She's like, was I high when I wrote this, when I came up with this concept? And I think that's just great you're already hearing the author's humor. And she says Handmaid's Tale, but what she means is, it's not really Handmaid's Tale. It's more of a concept. The concept in Handmaid's Tale that would interest Western audiences. And when you're reading the story, you see, it's not really Handmaid's Tale, but you are seeing a lot of those oppressive elements brought to life in the story because Wu Zetian, Pacific Rim, remember how there are two pilots? Yeah, you have yin and yang. You have the male and female pilots, and what the female pilots are they are concubines. They're basically fodder because it takes a lot of mental energy in order to control the chrysalis, which is what they call the giant robots that they fight in against the Hunans, which are aliens that are kind of trying to invade, right? And the women tend to just die. If they don't have enough spirit pressure, if they get overwhelmed by the men's spirit pressure, they do end up dying in battle. And it's very misogynistic. Zetian discovers the system is rigged against women. It's always rigged against women. And I like how the author kind of points that out. Like, it's rigged against women. That's just what it is. And you see the resentment in Zetian's characterization. I love her characterization because she decides to pretty much sacrifice herself to be a concubine for the Iron Prince because he killed her sister. And I don't just mean in battle. I mean, he beat her sister to death in their room. And everyone's just like, oh yeah, it was a fall. Like, fuck that. It was not a fall. He beat her to death. He's an abuser. So her goal is to stop that. And this isn't a spoiler because it's given away in the blurb of the book. She ends up coming out of this alive. She becomes the Iron Widow. And then she is kind of punished and teamed up with oh gosh, I can't remember his name. He's a prisoner, but he has a very high spirit pressure, which is why the government utilizes him. And I really do love the bond between the characterization. I do love how he's thought to be the criminal, right? But he's actually one of the best people out there. And the reason he's a criminal is because he killed his brothers for violent actions against women. Like, he did it. They deserved it. And I like how Zetian, she doesn't even ask. She's just like, her one question is, did they deserve it? And he's like, yes. And she says, okay, I believe you. And then you're going into developing their characterization, you're going into developing their personal narratives, you're going into developing who they are as characters, which I think is really, really engaging for the novel, because it really does set a precedence for their growth. And they do grow. Oh gosh, do they grow. Their growth is amazing, honestly. I love their character growth. I love their characterization. I love how they move through the story together, and I love how their relation does blossom into a polyamorous one, because there was always this boy. He was a, I guess, upper class citizen to Zetien's lower class citizenship, and he loved her and respected her more than her family. Like, her family's, they're a bunch of assholes. But you can't, it's systemic, They are assholes because society has determined women's worth this is what women's worth. So they've been brainwashed and predetermined to acknowledge that as their fact. They're kind of stuck. And Zetien's the opposite. And this boy, he taught her how to read. He taught her everything that was forbidden for women because he believed in her. And he respects her above everything. He respects her. And I love that. I love the respect in the relationship. I love who he is as a person. I love how there's always this edge of tension between them. And you're just kind of like, I don't know. Like, do I want to get invested in him or not? I don't want him to end up being like everyone else. And he ends up not being like everyone else. He stands by her side and her partner's side. And the three of them together develop this really wonderful polyamorous relationship that's based on mutual respect with one another. They care about one another. They fight for one another. And that's what makes them so good as a team. And that's why you're invested in their romance for these three characters, because of how just captivating they are, because of how wonderful they grow together, how they develop and how the story develops. And back to the feminism aspect of the story. So one thing that the author does highlight is foot binding in her novel, and I like how she uses a piece of her culture's history to use it as a form of misogyny and sexism. The physical representation of it is what I'm saying. Because foot binding, and it's, I don't know that it's in practice anymore. I don't think it is. I personally don't like it, but I'm Mexican and I was raised, in a Western culture, so my beliefs are going to be different. But Zetien, you can see she hates the foot binding, because what it is you're crushing young girls' feet. You're breaking their bones and you're binding them to make them smaller. This could lead to an infection, which means she could lose toes, and she has lost some toes, and she hates it. She hates that this is her life forever. She watches these other women who are considered barbarians walk away sure-footed in a way that she never could, and she says that. That's a direct quote. They walk away with such confidence that I could never muster, because of her feet, because of the foot binding, because and I did a little research. Chinese customs back in the day, the smaller your feet, the more feminine you were. It was also a mark of your station as well. So they actually encouraged infection in your feet so that you could lose toes, so that it would be easier to bind your feet and make them smaller and smaller. And I like how Zhao is using this practice to highlight the sexism and misogyny that is going on in the novel. It's just like how much do you have to like dislike yourself, or just like that you have to kind of prove your worth by hurting yourself to such an extreme for the approval of men, and I think it's empowering that this is something that Zetian, she butts heads with her family a lot. There are lots of scenes where she's just kind of staring at her feet, and I think they're really powerful because you're seeing what she's fighting for. You're seeing that she is a remarkable character. She has such strength and resilience in order to stand up for herself in the end, and I think that's really great. I ultimately love her. I think it's great, and I want to learn so much more about this empress in Chinese history who went through 2 dynasties, and she's just like, yeah, I'm empress now. Y'all gotta bow down to me. And I think it's great. It shows, just like in the book, you're seeing how she's manipulating the system to her benefit, how she's using the system to her benefit, how she's playing the politics. And I think that that's really engaging for the reader to see that unfold ultimately. So this was Iron Widow by Ziran J. Zhao. I really hope I said her name right. I highly recommend this book. I would have to give it 4.75 stars out of 5. Such a close 5. I'm so excited for the sequel. I can't wait to see how this story plays out. I love it. Please remember to support your local bookseller or online book retailer when purchasing the book instead of Amazon. I know our first bet is to always go to Amazon, but please support your bookstores and local booksellers. They need it way more than Amazon does, and there's nothing that beats walking inside a bookstore and smelling those books and just browsing the shelves. It's just, I work at a bookstore, and half the time I'm supposed to be shelving books, and I find books that, I'm like, ooh, this is interesting, and then I want to buy it, and then that's where my paycheck goes. So yeah, support your bookstores, please. You can go on bookshop.org, and they'll find an independent bookstore for you to visit, in your neighborhood. And remember, Barnes & Noble and Books A Million do ship across the country and internationally. So if money's tight, check out the book from your local library. And on that note, I hope you all will continue to support me by liking this podcast and sharing it with all your book-loving friends. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and as always, happy reading.